Jake had always been the kind of guy who needed proof for everything. At 32, he worked fixing computers during the day and spent his evenings watching Netflix or playing video games. His small apartment in Denver was perfectly ordinary, just like his life. The most exciting thing that happened to him was when his pizza arrived early on Friday nights. He definitely didn't believe in aliens. Sure, he'd seen the movies and heard the stories, but Jake was a practical man. If little green men were real, where was the evidence? Where were the photos that weren't blurry? It was all just stories to him. That Tuesday night started like any other. Jake had worked late, grabbed some Chinese food on the way home, and settled in to watch a documentary about space. The irony wasn't lost on him later. He fell asleep on his couch around midnight, the TV still playing softly in the background. Something woke him up at 3 in the morning. Not a sound exactly, but a feeling. You know that weird sensation when someone's watching you? That prickly feeling on the back of your neck. Jake had that, but stronger than he'd ever felt before. He opened his eyes slowly, expecting to see his cat staring at him from across the room. Instead, he saw something that made his brain completely freeze. Up top there was someone standing in his living room. But this wasn't just any someone. This person was tall, really tall, maybe 7 feet, and wearing some kind of armor that seemed to glow with a soft blue light. The armor looked like nothing he'd ever seen before, almost like it was grown rather than made. It moved and shifted, slightly, as if it was alive. Jake's first thought was that he was still dreaming. This had to be a dream. People didn't just appear in locked apartments wearing glowing armor. But when he blinked hard and looked again, the figure was still there. The person, and Jake was pretty sure it was a woman based on the shape, had her back to him. She was looking around his apartment like she was searching for something, and her hands was what looked like a weapon, but unlike any weapon Jake had ever seen. It was long and curved, almost like a spear, but it seemed to be made of some kind of crystal that pulsed with the same blue light as her armor. Jake's heart was beating so loud he was sure she could hear it. He tried to stay perfectly still, hoping she wouldn't notice he was awake. Maybe if he was really quiet, she would leave and he could pretend this never happened. But then she turned around. Her face was, well, it was almost human, but not quite. Her skin was pale, almost white, but it had that same soft glow as her armor. Her eyes were the strangest part. They kept changing color, shifting from silver to purple and back again. When she looked at him, Jake felt like she was seeing right through him, like she could read his thoughts. For what felt like forever, they just stared at each other. Jake couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. But here she was, standing in his living room at 3 in the morning. Then she spoke, and that's when Jake knew for sure this wasn't a dream. Her voice was unlike anything he'd ever heard. It sounded like music and wind and something electronic all mixed together. But somehow, impossibly, he understood what she was saying. "You are Jake Collins," she said. And hearing his own name in that strange, beautiful voice made everything real in a way that terrified him. "I have come very far to find you." Jake tried to speak, but no sound came out. He cleared his throat and tried again. Who are you?" She tilted her head, studying him like he was some kind of puzzle. "I am what your people might call a warrior. My name," she paused, like she was trying to translate something. "You may call me Zara." "What do you want?" Jake managed to whisper. Zara raised her weapon slightly, and Jake's blood turned to ice. But then something strange happened. She looked at the weapon, then back at him, and her expression changed. The cold, determined look in her eyes seemed to soften just a little. "I was sent here to..." She paused again, struggling with the words. "To end your life." Jake's whole world tilted. This couldn't be happening. "Why? I don't even know you. I've never done anything to anyone." "You are dangerous to my people," Zara said, but she didn't sound as sure as she had a moment ago. "Your mind, it creates interference. It disrupts. Our technology makes our ships difficult to control when they come near your planet." "I don't understand," Jake said, and he really didn't. "I fix computers. I'm nobody special. I can barely program my coffee maker." Zara stepped closer, and Jake pressed himself back into the couch. But instead of raising her weapon, she seemed to be studying him even more carefully. "You are not what I expected," she said quietly. "What did you expect? Someone harder, cruel. My leaders told me that humans like you were dangerous, that you would try to hurt me. But you are afraid. You are—" She searched for the word. "Small." "Thanks," Jake said, surprised that he could make a joke at a time like this. Something that might have been a smile flickered across Zara's face. That was humor. "Yes, I have heard of this human trait." They stood there in silence for another moment. Jake's fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now, curiosity. Here was proof that aliens were real, standing right in his living room. And she seemed just as confused about this situation as he was. "So what happens now?" Jake asked. Zara looked at her weapon again, then back at him for a moment. Something like uncertainty crossed her face. I am not sure." And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she was gone. Not walked away, not ran out the door, just gone. Like she had never been there at all. The only signs that she had ever existed were a few scorch marks on his carpet, where she had been standing, and a smell in the air like the ocean after a storm. Jake sat on his couch for the rest of the night, staring at those burn marks and wondering if he had lost his mind. But when morning came and the marks were still there, he knew it had all been real. The alien warrior had come to kill him, but for some reason, she hadn't, and somehow, Jake knew this wasn't over. Jake couldn't sleep for 3 days after that first visit. Every shadow in his apartment looked like it might be Zara. Every noise made him jump. He kept checking the burn marks on his carpet, touching them to make sure they were real. They were always there, proof that he wasn't going crazy. On Friday night, she came back. This time, Jake was ready. Well, as ready as someone could be for an alien visitor. He was sitting on his couch, pretending to watch TV, but really just waiting, when that same strange feeling washed over him. He wasn't surprised to look up and see her standing by his kitchen. "You're back," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Zara nodded. She was still wearing that amazing armor, still carrying her crystal weapon. But something was different. She seemed less sure of herself, less like a soldier and more like someone who was lost. "I have been watching you," she said. "That's not creepy at all," Jake muttered. "Creepy?" Zara tilted her head. "I do not know this word. It means scary, uncomfortable, like when someone watches you without you knowing." "Ah." Zara looked thoughtful. "Yes, I suppose it would be creepy. But I needed to understand you before I completed my mission." Jake's stomach dropped. "You're still planning to kill me?" Zara lowered her weapon slightly. "I am supposed to. But I'm confused. About what? About you?" She moved closer. And Jake tried not to flinch. "You are not like what my people told me humans were like. You have not tried to attack me or capture me. You have not called for help. You just sit here and talk to me. What else would I do? Run screaming, call the police?" Jake shook his head. "Who would believe me? Most humans would try to fight," Zara said, "or run. But you do neither. Why?" Jake thought about it. "I guess because you haven't actually hurt me. And honestly, this is the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me." That almost smile flickered across Zara's face again. "Interesting? Yeah, I mean, you're an alien from space. That's pretty amazing, even if you were here to kill me." Zara sat down on the edge of Jake's coffee table, careful not to damage it with her armor. "Tell me about your life," she said suddenly. "My life? Why? I need to understand what I am supposed to destroy." So Jake told her. He talked about his boring job fixing computers, about his small apartment, about how he had no family nearby and only a few friends he saw once in a while. He told her about his favorite movies and the books he liked to read. He even told her about his cat, Mr. Whiskers, who had died last year. Zara listened to everything with intense focus, like she was studying for a test. Sometimes she asked questions that seemed strange to Jake but made sense to her. "You live alone," she said. "Are you not lonely?" "Sometimes," Jake admitted, "but I'm used to it. On my world, warriors live in groups. We train together, eat together, sleep in the same halls. I have never been alone like this. Is that hard? Being alone here? Zara was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she said finally. Very hard. They talked until sunrise. Zara told him about her world. Called Zarian. It sounded like a harsh place, all metal cities, and endless training. She had been raised from childhood to be a warrior. Fighting was all she knew. But your people are dying. Jake asked. Our sun grows cold. Our resources run low. We need a new home. Zara's eyes shifted from silver to purple. Earth is perfect for us. But humans like you. Your brain patterns, they interfere with our ships and machines. You make it dangerous for us to land safely. So you have to get rid of people like me before your people can move here. Yes, Zara looked sad. It is the only way. How many people like me are there? Not many. Perhaps a few hundred across your whole planet. Jake felt sick. And you're supposed to kill all of us. There are many warriors like me. Each has a list. They sat in silence as the morning light filled Jake's apartment. Zara looked tired, which seemed strange for someone in armor. I should go, she said, standing up. Will you come back? Zara paused at the question. Yes, I think I will. After she left, Jake realized something important. Zara had been there for hours, and not once had she threatened him or raised her weapon. She could have completed her mission easily, but she didn't. Something was changing. The visits became regular after that. Zara would appear 2 or 3 times a week, always at night. Sometimes she came through the front door like a normal person, though Jake never figured out how she got past the locks. Other times she just appeared in his living room like magic. She was curious about everything. Jake showed her how his coffee maker worked, and she was amazed by the simple machine. She watched him cook dinner and asked dozens of questions about human food. When Jake showed her a funny movie, she didn't laugh, but her glowing markings pulsed brighter, which he learned meant she was happy. Your people find joy in strange things. She told him one night, what do your people find joy in? Victory in battle, completing missions successfully, serving the greater good of Zarian. That sounds lonely. I am beginning to think it was. Jake started looking forward to her visits. His boring life suddenly had purpose, even if that purpose was helping an alien warrior understand humanity. He bought extra food and made sure his apartment was clean. He found himself picking movies he thought Zara might find interesting. One night, she arrived looking different. Her armor seemed dimmer, and she moved more slowly. Are you okay? Jake asked. I am weakening. Being away from my world for so long, it affects me. Is that dangerous? Eventually, yes, but not yet. Jake felt a stab of worry that surprised him. Maybe you should go back. I cannot. Not until my mission is complete. Zara looked at him with those color-changing eyes. But I find myself reluctant to complete it, because we're friends now. Friends. Zara repeated the word like she was tasting it. Yes, I believe we are friends. This is new for me. New how? Warriors do not have friends. We have allies, partners in battle, fellow soldiers, but not friends. Jake reached out slowly and touched her armored hand. It was warm and seemed to pulse with life. Well, you have one now. Zara stared down at their joined hands for a long time. When she looked up, there were tears in her strange eyes. This makes my mission very difficult, she whispered. Then maybe it's time to think about a different mission, Jake said softly. But they both knew it wasn't that simple. Somewhere out there, other warriors were completing their assignments. And eventually, someone would notice that Zara wasn't completing hers. It had been 6 weeks since Zara first appeared in Jake's apartment, and their friendship had grown stronger with each visit. She no longer carried her weapon when she came to see him, and Jake had gotten used to having an alien warrior as his closest friend. He even bought a second coffee mug, just for her. That Thursday night started normally. Jake was making spaghetti for dinner, doubling the recipe because he knew Zara would show up. Eventually, she always did on Thursdays. But when she appeared in his kitchen, something was wrong. Her armor was glowing brighter than usual, almost angry looking. Her face was tense, and she kept looking over her shoulder like someone was following her. Zara? What's wrong? I am in trouble, she said quickly. Big trouble. My commander knows I have not completed my mission. Jake's heart skipped. Your commander? Kexter. He leads our unit. He has come to Earth to find out why I am taking so long. And he discovered that you are still alive. Zara's eyes shifted rapidly between colors. Something Jake had learned meant she was very upset. He is coming here. Tonight. Jake felt cold all over. Coming here. To my apartment. Yes. He will finish what I could not. Zara moved closer to him. Jake, you have to leave. Now, pack whatever you can carry and go far away. What about you? I will face whatever punishment Kexter decides. It is what I deserve for failing in my duty. No. Jake surprised himself with how firm his voice sounded. I'm not leaving you. Jake, you do not understand. Kexter is not like me. He has never questioned orders. Never wondered if there might be another way. He will kill you without hesitation. And then he will probably kill me for failing. Then we'll face him together. You cannot fight a Zarian warrior. You are brave, but you are just human. Before Jake could answer, the temperature in his apartment dropped 10 degrees. The lights flickered, and every electronic device he owned started making weird noises. Jake's coffee maker beeped frantically, his TV channels changed by themselves, and his smoke detector started chirping. He is here, Zara whispered. The front door to Jake's apartment didn't open. It exploded. Through the smoke and debris walked the biggest person Jake had ever seen. If Zara was tall at 7 feet, this guy had to be at least 8. His armor was darker than Zara's, more angular, and covered with what looked like battle scars. In his hands was a weapon that made Zara's crystal spear look like a toy. But the scariest thing about him was his face, where Zara's eyes showed emotion and changed color. His were flat black, like looking into deep water. When he looked at Jake, Jake felt like he was staring at his own death. Zara, the newcomer said, and his voice was like metal scraping against stone. You have disappointed me greatly, Commander Kexter. Zara stepped between Jake and the massive warrior. I can explain. Explain what? How you have spent weeks playing with your target, instead of eliminating him. How you have forgotten your duty to our people. Kexter's weapon hummed with energy. Or perhaps you will explain how you have allowed yourself to become attached to this creature. He is not a creature. He is intelligent, kind, worthy of life. Kexter laughed, and it was the coldest sound Jake had ever heard. You have been corrupted by extended contact with inferior beings. This is why we complete missions quickly. This is why we do not engage with targets. Maybe the missions are wrong, Zara said quietly. The silence that followed was terrifying. Kexter stared at Zara like she had just said the most shocking thing possible. Wrong, he repeated slowly. Our missions come from the High Command. They are never wrong. But what if they are? What if there is another way for our people to survive that doesn't require destroying innocent lives? There is no other way. The calculations have been done. The decision has been made. Kexter raised his weapon. Step aside, Zara. I will finish what you could not, and then we will discuss your punishment. No. Jake could hardly believe it. Zara had moved fully in front of him, her own weapon appearing in her hands like magic. She was going to fight her commander. She was going to fight another member of her own species to protect him. Zara, don't. Jake whispered. I'm not worth this. She looked back at him for just a moment, and her eyes were bright silver. Yes, you are. The fight that followed was unlike anything Jake had ever seen, even in movies. The two warriors moved so fast they were almost blurs, their weapons clashing in explosions of light and energy. They fought through his living room, destroying his couch and coffee table. They crashed into his kitchen, reducing his dining set to splinters. Jake pressed himself against the wall, trying to stay out of the way. Both warriors were incredibly skilled, but Kexter was bigger and stronger. Worse, Zara had been weakened by her long stay on Earth. Jake could see she was already getting tired when Kexter's weapon slammed into Zara's side, sending her crashing into Jake's bookshelf. Jake couldn't just watch anymore. He grabbed the heaviest thing he could find, his old laptop, and threw it as hard as he could at Kexter's head. It bounced off harmlessly, but it got the commander's attention. "Foolish creature," Kexter snarled. Turning toward Jake, "You only delay your death." But those few seconds were enough for Zara to recover. She launched herself at Kexter with a cry that was part anger and part desperation. Her weapon found a gap in his armor, and suddenly the massive warrior was on his knees, dark liquid flowing from the wound. Impossible. He gasped, "You would betray your own people for this." "This human? I would choose friendship over blind obedience," Zara replied, breathing hard. "I would choose love over fear." Love. The word hung in the air between them. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Had she really said love? Kexter looked up at Zara with something like pity in his black eyes. "Then you are no longer one of us. You are exile, cast out. When our people come to claim this world, you will be considered an enemy. I understand," Zara said quietly. "And you," Kexter turned his dying gaze to Jake, "you have doomed this world. Without the interference patterns eliminated, our ships will crash when they try to land. Our people will die trying to reach safety. Their blood is on your hands." With those words, Kexter collapsed. His body began to fade, just like Zara did when she left, until there was nothing left but scorch marks on Jake's ruined floor. Jake and Zara stood in the wreckage of his apartment, both breathing heavily. Everything Jake owned was destroyed or damaged. His normal life was completely gone. But when he looked at Zara, still glowing softly in her armor, still beautiful despite being hurt and exhausted, Jake realized something important. His old life had been pretty empty anyway. Maybe it was time for a new one. "So," he said, trying to keep his voice light, "did you mean what you said about love?" Zara's armor flickered, and suddenly she looked very young and uncertain. I am not sure I understand love the way humans do, but I know that the thought of you being hurt makes me feel broken inside. I know that I would rather be cast out from my people than see you harmed. Is that love?" Jake stepped carefully through the debris and took her hands in his. "Yeah," he said softly, "I think it is." "Then yes, I love you, Jake Collins. I love you too, Zara." They kissed then, gentle and careful. Two beings from different worlds finding something beautiful together. But even as they held each other, both knew their troubles were just beginning. Zara was now in exile, cut off from her people and slowly dying on a world that wasn't hers, and somewhere out there, more warriors were completing their missions, getting ready for an invasion that would now fail because of Jake. Their love had saved Jake's life, but it might have doomed to entire species. Jake's apartment was completely destroyed, so they had to leave Denver immediately. Within hours of Kexter's attack, strange government vehicles started showing up on his street. Men in dark suits were asking questions about unusual energy readings and reports of explosions. Jake and Zara barely escaped through the back window of his building. They drove his old Honda as far as it would take them, which turned out to be a small mountain town in Colorado called Pine Ridge. With the last of Jake's savings, they rented a tiny cabin at the edge of town, far enough from neighbors that Zara's glowing armor wouldn't attract attention. The first few weeks were the hardest of Jake's life. Everything he had ever known was gone. His job, his apartment, his few friends. He couldn't contact any of them without putting everyone in danger. He was essentially dead to his old world. But the hardest part wasn't losing his old life. It was watching Zara slowly fade away, without the special atmosphere of her home world. Zara was like a flower trying to bloom in the wrong climate. Her armor grew dimmer each day. The beautiful blue glow that had first amazed Jake was now barely a flicker. Her strength, which had once seemed unlimited, was leaving her bit by bit. "How long do you have?" Jake asked one morning, watching her struggle to lift a simple coffee cup. "I do not know," Zara admitted. "No Zarian warrior has ever lived away from our world for this long. Perhaps weeks, perhaps months. There has to be something we can do." "There is nothing, Jake. I made my choice with full knowledge of the consequences." But Jake wasn't ready to give up. He spent hours online, researching everything he could about atmospheric composition and alien biology. He read science papers he barely understood, looking for anything that might help. Most of it was useless, but slowly, pieces of a solution began to form in his mind. "Tell me exactly what you need from your world's air," he said one evening. Zera described the complex mix of gases and energy particles that Xerian warriors required to survive. To Jake, it sounded impossible to recreate, but then he remembered something from his college chemistry classes, combined with what Zera had taught him about her people's technology. "What if we could make a synthetic version, not perfect, but enough to keep you stable? It would require knowledge of both human science and Xerian technology," Zera said doubtfully. "Good thing I know someone who understands both." Working together became their new mission. Jake's background in electronics and programming, combined with Zera's deep knowledge of her people's science, created something neither could have achieved alone. They turned the cabin's basement into a makeshift laboratory. The process was slow and frustrating. For every small success, they had 10 failures. Jake's first attempt to create synthetic Xerian atmosphere nearly poisoned them both. Zera's efforts to build the needed equipment from Earth materials kept shorting out the cabin's electrical system, but gradually they made progress. More importantly, they grew closer. Living together 24 hours a day forced them to really get to know each other. Jake learned that Zera was actually quite funny once she understood human humor. She had been raised to be serious all the time, but she loved wordplay and silly jokes. Jake discovered he could make her armor pulse brighter just by doing impressions of the characters from her favorite Earth movie, which turned out to be a cartoon about talking animals. Zera learned that Jake was much braver than he thought he was. She watched him tackle scientific problems that would have challenged Xerian scholars, driven by nothing but determination to save her life. She saw him give up everything he had ever known, without complaint, simply because he loved her. "On my world," she told him one night as they worked side by side, "warriors are not allowed to form attachments. We are taught that caring for individuals makes us weak, that only duty to the whole matters. Do you think that's true?" Jake asked, not looking up from the device he was building. "I used to, but watching you work to save my life, seeing you sacrifice everything for one person, I think perhaps caring for someone can make you stronger, not weaker." "Stronger how?" "You are doing things you never thought possible. You are learning sciences you never studied. You are solving problems that would challenge trained warriors. Love is giving you power you never knew you had." Jake looked up at her then, and saw that her eyes were bright silver, the color they turned when she was happy. "You're giving me power I never knew I had." Their biggest breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday in their second month at the cabin. Jake had finally figured out how to create a stable mixture that approximated Xerian atmosphere, while Zera had built a device that could generate the energy particles her body needed. When they combined the two systems, the results were better than either had dared hope. Within hours of breathing the synthetic atmosphere, Zera's armor began to glow brighter. Her strength returned. Gradually but noticeably, for the first time since leaving her world, she looked truly healthy. "It worked," she whispered, staring at her hands as they pulsed with renewed light. "We worked," Jake corrected, pulling her into his arms. But their success created a new problem. The energy signature of their makeshift lab was apparently visible to the same government agents who had been tracking them. One morning, Jake woke to find black SUVs surrounding their cabin. The agents who knocked on their door weren't hostile, exactly, but they weren't friendly either. Agent Rodriguez, a serious woman in her 40s, explained that they represented a classified government program that dealt with unusual phenomena. "We know what you are," she said to Zera, "and we know what you've done. The question is, what do you want to do now?" "We just want to be left alone," Jake said. "I'm afraid that's not possible. You've created technology that doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth. You've harbored a potential enemy alien, and according to our intelligence, there are more of her people coming." Zera stepped forward. "I'm no longer one of their people. I was exiled for refusing to complete my mission." "Yes, we know about that too. The question is, whose side are you on now?" Jake and Zera looked at each other. In that moment, Jake realized that their quiet life in the mountains was over. The real world had found them, and they would have to decide how to face it. But as he looked at Zara, healthy and strong again, her armor glowing with life, Jake felt ready for whatever came next. They had already proven that love could overcome the differences between their species. They had built something impossible together, created solutions that neither could have found alone. "We're on humanity's side," Jake said firmly. "Both of us." Agent Rodriguez studied them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Good, because we're going to need all the help we can get outside." Storm clouds gathered over the mountains, and Jake couldn't help but think they were a symbol of the challenges ahead. But inside the cabin, Zara's armor pulsed with warm, steady light, and Jake knew that whatever storms came, they would face them together. Working with the government wasn't what Jake had expected. Instead of being locked up or experimented on, he and Zara found themselves in a comfortable facility in Nevada, working with some of the smartest people on Earth. Agent Rodriguez had been telling the truth when she said they needed help. "The situation is worse than we initially thought," Dr. Chen, the project's lead scientist, explained during their first briefing. "Our satellites have detected at least 15 Xerian ships in the outer solar system. They're not moving yet, but they're clearly preparing for something, an invasion." Zara said quietly, "My people are gathering their forces." "But you said they couldn't land safely because of people like Jake," Agent Rodriguez pointed out. "They cannot land safely, no. But they can crash land. Many will die, but some will survive. Enough to establish a foothold on your world." Jake felt sick. "How many people like me are there?" "We've identified about 400 individuals worldwide, with the specific brain pattern that interferes with Xerian technology," Dr. Chen replied. "We've been trying to contact them all. But what?" Agent Rodriguez's expression was grim. 60% of them are already dead. The Xerian warriors completed their missions. The weight of that information hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. Hundreds of people killed simply because their brains worked differently. People who probably never even knew they were special, just living their normal lives until an alien warrior showed up to end them. "We have to stop this," Jake said. "How?" Dr. Chen asked. "Even if we could defend the remaining targets, and that's a big if, the Xerian fleet will still try to invade. They're desperate. Their world really is dying. Then we need to find another solution," Zara said. "Something that lets my people survive without destroying yours." That became their new mission. Jake and Zara worked with the government team to develop technologies that could help both species. The synthetic atmosphere they had created in the cabin was just the beginning. With proper resources and a team of experts, they began developing ideas that seemed impossible just months before. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While studying the interference pattern that people like Jake created, Dr. Chen made a startling discovery. It's not just interference, she explained excitedly during a late-night lab session. It's a resonance pattern. Your brain waves actually enhance certain types of energy when properly channeled. "Enhance how?" Jake asked. "Watch this." Dr. Chen activated a small device that looked similar to the atmospheric generator Jake and Zara had built. Normally, it could produce enough synthetic Xerian atmosphere for one person. But when Jake stood near it and concentrated, the output tripled. "Incredible," Zara breathed. "Jake, do you understand what this means?" Jake was beginning to. "Instead of being a problem for your people, people like me could be part of the solution." Over the following weeks, they developed the idea further. With Jake's unique brain pattern amplifying the technology, they could create atmospheric processors powerful enough to terraform small areas of Earth, making them suitable for Xerian colonists without harming the existing environment. "Shared world," Zara said one evening as they reviewed their plans. "Humans and Xerians living side by side, each helping the other survive." "Think your people will go for it?" Jake asked. "I do not know. It would require them to abandon the idea of conquest, to accept partnership instead of domination." "Well, we'll never know unless we try." The test came sooner than anyone expected. 3 weeks later, the Xerian ships began moving toward Earth. Whatever signal they had been waiting for, they had apparently received it. "We're out of time," Agent Rodriguez announced during an emergency meeting. Our estimates show they'll reach Earth in 48 hours. Then we contact them now. Jake said, we show them what we've developed and hope they listen. And if they don't, Dr. Chen asked. Jake looked at Zara, who nodded encouragingly. Then we stand and fight together. Using Zara's knowledge of Zirian communication systems, they sent a message to the approaching fleet. The response came 12 hours later. A transmission that made everyone in the facility hold their breath. This is High Commander Vex High of the Zirian fleet. The voice was cold and mechanical through the translation system. We will accept your proposal for negotiation. One representative will meet with us. Send the exile Zara and the interference pattern. Call Jake Collins to coordinates. We are transmitting. They want both of us, Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. It could be a trap, Agent Rodriguez warned. Once you're on their ship, we have no way to protect you. We have to try, Zara said. This might be the only chance for peace. The meeting took place on a small Zirian scout ship that landed in the Nevada desert. Jake had never been on an alien spacecraft before, and he was amazed by how different everything was. The walls seemed to be alive, pulsing with soft light, and the air tasted like metal and ozone. High Commander Vex High was even more intimidating than Kexter had been, ancient and scarred. She looked like she had been fighting wars since before Jake was born. But when she studied the atmospheric processors and the data about shared colonization, her expression grew thoughtful. You propose that we abandon our mission of conquest, she said finally. I propose that you accept a better mission, Zara replied. Survival through cooperation instead of survival through destruction. And you believe this human technology will work on the scale we require, with people like Jake helping to power it, yes. Vexhide turned those ancient eyes on Jake. You would do this? Help the people who came to destroy your world. Jake thought about all the people who had already died, about Zara's people facing extinction, about the possibility of two species finding a way to live together instead of fighting. Your people aren't evil, he said finally. You're desperate. You're trying to save your families, your civilization. I can understand that. And if we can find a way for everyone to survive, then yes, I'll help. The negotiations took 3 days. Not everyone on either side was happy with the agreement, but eventually, a deal was reached. Zirian colonists would be allowed to settle in specific areas of Earth that could be terraformed to meet their needs. In exchange, they would share their advanced technology and help defend Earth from other potential threats. People with Jake's unique brain pattern, instead of being targets, became the most important people in the new alliance. They were the living keys that made the terraforming technology work. The very thing that had marked them for death became the thing that saved both species. 6 months later, Jake stood in the observation deck of New Zirian, the first joint human-alien city. Below them, human children played with young Zirians in parks that somehow supported both Earth plants and alien crystal formations. The air was breathable for both species, the temperature comfortable for everyone. Do you ever regret it? He asked Zara, who was standing beside him, her armor glowing softly in the artificial sunset. Regret what? Not completing your original mission, choosing me over your duty. Zara took his hand in hers, her warm touch familiar and comforting after all these months. Jake, my original mission was to kill you so that my people could invade your world. My new mission is to build a world where both our peoples can live and grow together. Which sounds more worthy to you? Jake smiled and pulled her closer. Through the window, he could see human and Zirian engineers working side by side on the next phase of construction. Children of both species attended the same schools. Families of both kinds shopped in markets that sold foods from 2 different worlds. I love you, he said. The words as natural as breathing now. And I love you, Zara replied. But more than that, I love what we built together. I love the world we made possible. That night, as they lay in their bed in their apartment that somehow perfectly blended human comfort with Zirian technology, Jake thought about how much his life had changed. A year ago, he had been a lonely guy fixing computers, living a small, quiet life. Now he was one of the most important people in a new kind of civilization. Married to an alien warrior who had chosen love over war. Outside their window, the lights of New Zerion twinkled like stars, each one representing a life saved, a family brought together, a future made possible by the simple decision to choose understanding over fear. The alien warrior who had come to kill him now slept peacefully. Beside him, her armor dimmed to a soft glow that served as a nightlight. Her breathing was steady and calm, the breathing of someone who had found peace after a lifetime of conflict. Jake closed his eyes and let himself drift off to sleep, surrounded by the gentle hum of two civilizations learning to live as one. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build bridges between worlds. But tonight, he was simply a man in love, lying next to the person who had changed everything, in a city that proved love really could conquer all.